Welcome, everyone, to this beautiful spring day here in Maine, to the Maine State Chamber of Commerce's webinar on succession planning as an entrepreneurial exit. My name is Ben Gilman. I am General Counsel here at the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and we're proud to bring you this presentation in partnership with our good friends at the University of Maine Graduate School of Business. This webinar is timely in nature here in the state of Maine to talk about succession planning as an entrepreneurial exit. Maine is a small business state. We all know 99% of our businesses here in Maine are considered small businesses by the federal definition of less than 500 employees. Over 90% of them have less than 20 employees. And as a state that has the oldest population in the country, and as we see people aging out of the workforce, it's very, very important here in Maine that we have the discussion about succession planning. And we're so excited to have this opportunity to bring the experts that we have here in the state of Maine to talk about this important topic. I'd like to thank our sponsors that have joined us as well that make these programs possible. As I said, the University of Maine Graduate School of Business. Our supporting sponsors for our webinars here at the Maine State Chamber of Commerce are Mera Health, Caritas, Bangor Savings Bank, Central Maine Power, Eaton Peabody, Mimic, that's Maine Employers Mutual Insurance Company, and Rudman and Winchell. As I mentioned earlier, we have the experts in the field here to give presentations, but I want to walk through a few ground rules before we get to that. This meeting is being recorded, so everyone's aware, and it will be available afterwards for people to view after. In order to reduce background noise, everyone comes in on mute, so you know. If you have a question, there will be a Q&A at the end. Feel free to write it in the chat feature, and at the end of the conclusion of our presentation, we'll ask those questions of the presenters. So a copy of the meeting, all the materials you're going to see here as well will be available on mainechamber.org/webinars. So with that being said, we'll get straight to our program, and I'd like to introduce our experts that we have here joining with us today. The first one is Dr. Faye Gilbert. Dr. Gilbert is the Executive Dean of the Maine Business School. She's also the Interim Dean of the Graduate School of Business. Dr. Gilbert has served as the Dean of the Maine Business School since March 1st, 2019. Prior to UMaine, she served as Dean of Business at the University of Southern Mississippi, Radford University, and for Georgia College and State University. She received her Ph.D. in marketing from the University of North Texas and has published over 50 articles on aspects of decision-making, as well as one book on the intersection of customer relationship management and technology. She has served as president of 3 regional organizations and is currently serving as the chair of the Continuous Improvement Review Committee for AACSB, the International Gold Standard for Accreditation of Business Programs. Joining Dr. Gilbert today is Dr. Jason Harkins. Dr. Harkins is the Associate Dean of Maine Business School and the Associate Professor of Management at UMaine. Dr. Harkins received his PhD from the Price College of Business at the University of Oklahoma in Strategic Management with an interest in entrepreneurship. Prior to this, he earned a BS in Management from Truman State University and an MBA from the University of Missouri. Jason has teaching and research interests related to the intersection of strategy, entrepreneurship, and small business management. His newest research streams focus on studying human capital acquisition and retention in new small firms and entrepreneurial exit. I think we can all agree those are the right people to have this discussion here in the state of Maine today. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to another friend we have at the University of Maine Graduate School of Business, Jamie Ballinger, who will moderate the discussion, the presentations this morning. Jamie?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As he said, my name is Jamie Ballinger. I am the Assistant Dean of the Graduate School of Business at the University of Maine. More importantly, I am your contact at the University of Maine and the Maine Business School if you have any questions or concerns or would like to reach out and discuss some ideas that you have. I'll be dropping my contact information into the chat here in just a minute. Now, after the presentation, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the Workforce Partners Program. That is a program which enables any member of any chamber and throughout the entire state of Maine to receive tuition discounting to the Maine MBA. It's a tremendous opportunity for you and your employees to be able to advance their education and pursue a higher degree. I'll be here the entire time monitoring the chat. I'll be here to answer your questions, and I'll be here to tell you more in just a little bit. But without any further delay, I would like to go ahead and open it up to Dr. Jason Harkins, who is going to lead our presentation today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Great to see everyone, and we're gonna put up our slides here. We're excited today to be talking to you about succession planning and entrepreneurial exit. We want to talk really through the process and emphasize the importance of this topic, but we're also going to ask you to participate. So we've got a kind of a series of polls interspersed throughout our presentation that we would appreciate your participation in, because it helps us to understand not only who are you, but then how does this audience align with what we're seeing as trends nationally and in Maine. So the first poll here, if you can take a few seconds and answer 3 questions for us, should have a poll come up here in just a second answering these 3 questions. All right, great. Starting to see some participation. That's fantastic.
And interesting and very much in line with what Ben was saying about the University of Maine. So
absolutely. And so
about Maine.
Yeah. So we are good. We're seeing a lot of partnerships, some corporations, some nonprofits, a lot of employers in the 1 to 10 category, and good distribution of the generations here. And all of these pieces are important, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So I think we're going to close the poll here. See, and so what we really want to talk to you a little bit about today is what we're, the context for this conversation. And so if we can, we see, as I said, a lot of partnerships, a lot of people with employment in that 1 to 10 range, a lot of baby boomers and Gen Xers in the participation group here. And this aligns very nicely with what we see nationally and in the state of Maine. And so if we can move to the next slide, what we see here is that nationally, there are over 2 million businesses that are owned by baby boomers, with the Gen Xers being just slightly more than that on a percentage basis. They're just about 2.5 million businesses, representing, as you see there, 24 million employees. And in the state of Maine, proportionally, it's actually a little bit higher out of the total number of businesses, with almost 13,000 boomer owned businesses employing over 100,000 people, generating $3 billion in payroll. And this is a really important piece of context, because we know when we're talking about entrepreneurial exit and succession planning, we want to make sure that we are really understanding where things are at. And so Gen X and baby boomers represent the vast majority of all small business owners nationally, as we're seeing in our group here today. So we have another poll here coming up that we want to talk a little bit about, and we want to start to dive into this notion of succession planning. So we'll open up the poll again. 3 quick questions. What's your guess nationally at the percentage of business owners that have started doing some planning for their exit? Cut off the bottom part of that question there. So what percent of business owners have started planning for their exit? And then what is your timeline for exit? If you were thinking about your own idea and you are a business owner or the chief executive or manager of a business, and then just generally, do you have a plan in place now? Certainly seeing that overwhelming majority don't have a plan in place just yet, but that's okay. We're going to talk a little bit about that here through the rest of our presentation. In that kind of pretty well split, 3 to 5 years being the predominant timeline for exit. but a good split between those that are looking to close a little bit quicker and older. And then you think about 20% of businesses have started planning their exit. So we will see, if we look at what the data suggests on a national basis on the next slide, that we're really looking at about 40% of owner, or 60% of owners have never thought about doing any sort of succession planning or exit planning. So 40% have started doing some of that. And that is something that we've identified as kind of a core issue as we start to talk to business owners across the state of Maine and across the country. We need 80% of owners haven't taken a step. 40% of owners have never, or 60% of owners have never thought about succession planning, but we know that that process needs to begin sooner rather than later. And one of the big reasons that it needs to begin is because, as we see there, 41% of business owners have all of their wealth tied up in business, right? We know that business owners are much less likely to have kind of a diversified wealth that is going to allow them to move into retirement. And that is something that is particularly concerning when you see those statistics onto the right of your slide. Right, many of us think about planning for exit, and we think about, oh, well, I'm just going to sell the business when it's time to get out, or I'm just going to hand it off. And when we look at the data, it's not to say that they don't happen, but it requires real conscientiousness and real intentionality. And that's one of the things that we're here to talk to you about today, is that we want you to start thinking about this intentionally as you are making your plan. And this is important because planning and engaging in the work of moving toward an exit over some period of time has a huge impact on company value. There are steps that you can take in your business to make it more valuable, whether you sell it or you hand it down. Has a huge impact on the socio-emotional costs of handing it down, especially if you're going to move into a second generation family-owned business. We want to be very conscientious about doing that in the right way and really engaging in a systematic kind of change management approach, which Faye is going to talk about here in just a minute. It has a big impact on financial independence and on your employees. If you can engage in this process, you can bring them alongside and you plan for it, then you can be systematic here. If you get to tomorrow and you decide, oh, well, I need to exit the business, then you really are, you're stuck where you are. And we think that with some efforts engaged in by you over a period of time, you'll be better positioned to really capture the full value and be able to communicate the value to not only a potential buyer or a next generation, but also to your employees. All right, so the next, I think we have one more quick poll. So if we look at, for general exit options, if you say, I don't have an exit plan, but if I did, if you don't have one, that's great. Or, we'd love to know that. But then also, if you think about, is your plan to sell to somebody else, sell it into your family, sell it into your employees, or to close the business? And then the second question is kind of diving a little bit further into where you are in the process. If you are thinking about the process at all, where are you at in that process? And love to hear about that. Looks like we've got a really even split about, for those of you that do have an exit plan, where we're looking to exit, with a mixture of passing it down family business into the family, sell it into the employees, and selling it externally, with the majority not necessarily having an exit plan if you're 3 to 5 years out and you haven't thought about that. And then the most of you have begun considering exit planning, which is phenomenal. Having started at all is a great place. And so I'm now going to hand this off to to Dean Faye Gilbert to talk about types of exit in the process.
Jump in at any time, Jason. When we're looking at exit strategies, one is to simply close the business, which is really suboptimal, not only for the owners and the employees, but also the state of Maine and beyond. If it's an ongoing business that's providing value, then another option is to try and sell it externally, or to find an insider, which all of you were doing in that poll saying that you're thinking about it. The key to make it an entrepreneurial exit is in viewing it as a process. It's similar to a stream. The business can continue on. It'll change. It'll morph into new ways and add new sources of value over time, but it doesn't have to end or to close. To view succession planning as a process. The risk of the socio-emotional side, there was a business, a manufacturing firm in this case study where the father had founded it, and when he passed away, he left it to 10 family members. They proceeded to really fight tooth and nail, to argue, to slam doors, to be estranged. Bill then took over, and now that he and Nancy are ready to pass it on, they have 3 children, but those 3 children are not getting along well. They're also jockeying for place. And so this lack of discussion and transparency and working toward that stream to carry the business on has led to now perhaps 3 generations not faring well in this process. So the poll, in thinking about how many successors do you see for your business that would be able at this time to step in and take it over? And to what extent have you begun to transparently discuss these issues with people in your organization? Do we have this poll or we don't? And it's okay if we don't. I mean, you see the issues. There
we go.
Let's see what you think.
And one of the important things to make as a point here is that succession planning, identifying that successor, is one part of this exit planning, this entrepreneurial exit. Because as Faye just mentioned, right, we could just close the business. So you might not have a successor if that's your plan, but we want to emphasize that obviously wealth capture is overwhelmingly dominated by business owners at a transition to somebody else, right? And so succession planning becomes really critical if you are looking to sell or otherwise, capture that wealth versus shutting the business down.
It is good to see that some have begun discussing it. It's good to see that those who've not yet begun to discuss it are here at this seminar and thinking about it and beginning to collect information about it, and that you do see one or more people who could step into the role and carry the business on. Sometimes that's the first step in being able to envision the change management strategy that succession planning requires. So if you are looking at this as change management 101, succession planning is just that, to begin to communicate carefully and transparently, which helps you with buy-in. The challenge there is when you start saying, well, when I'm gone, or well, when I retire, the response from people politely has to be, oh no, you're going to be here forever. We don't need to talk about this. I don't want to hear you bring this up. I just don't want to hear it. But to begin to say, well, I'm not saying it's today, but within the next 5 to 10 years, let's begin early to plan how we're going to approach having this organization continue on and develop the leadership expertise within the organization to know that we are in good shape to maintain the employment here and the livelihood for the people that are employed. Seeing the pathways to change and seeing the path for the organization and expressing it helps people begin to always see continuous improvements in what they're doing. That change is a part of life, and it also applies to this business organization. To honor the legacy of the founder and the current leader is important. To have people comfortable with hearing you're not being disloyal if you begin to talk about the stream continuing on for this organization. No one person is indispensable is the concept. So beginning to identify early successors and develop their leadership skills and their ability to run the organization will reduce the impact on the business, the employees, the community, the state of Maine. You can either do it upfront or you can stay on with the company after the sale and do it then. Beginning to get people accustomed to looking at continuous improvement as a way of life is not bad. What did I forget, Jason?
No, I mean, I think that is exactly the point, is that this is a pathway. It's a process. It's a process you can start now, whether you're planning to exit in 6 months or 6 years. But starting the process now, I think, is absolutely the key. I have a good friend of mine who coined the term basically intrapreneur. You know, being whether you're starting a business tomorrow or leaving a business tomorrow, start running the business with the end in mind. You have to have this plan in order to be successful in achieving the outcomes you want when you go to hand it off to the next generation or somebody else.
So building systems, I'll start this and then hand it off. Building systems can begin as simple as in my positions, I've asked people in key roles within the organization to start with a folder or a book or an e-file anymore, and to write down what would their successor need to know if they were going to run the marketing function for that operation. What are the key things that you don't want to walk out the door if that employee leaves, that are important for the success of your management operation or sales and marketing or operations? And in smaller companies, that might be one key employee that is handling a lot. In larger companies, you're talking about full departments that you need to begin to think about how would they pass on the leadership of those functions to the next generation. And considering the valuation of the firm, I know Jason could do a whole day seminar on just options for valuing the firm and how to go about valuing the firm. But you can really make a difference in the value of the firm during the entrepreneurial exit if you start 3 to 5 years before you intend to exit.
Right, and this speaks directly to something that, as I have interacted with small business owners all over the state and entrepreneurs, right? This is something where we find that our desires today are sometimes in conflict with our desires for where we want it to go, right? And so if you are somebody who has been managing your tax liability, let's say, around your business and showing limited profit and rolling as many expenses onto the profit and loss statement as you can, then that's great from a tax liability perspective and a tax burden on your business. But it makes it more challenging to justify getting the full value of your business when you go to sell it. Many, I would say most small businesses are sold on some multiple of your earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation, right? And so that number matters a lot as you think about what are the pieces and steps that you can take today to prepare yourself for receiving the full value that you have created over potentially decades of work in your particular discipline. And so we want to be really thoughtful about getting out in front of managing and understanding the value of that business. How is it calculated? What else is happening in my industry, either with companies that I know or companies on a national scale, that is going to influence how somebody else is going to look at the value? And I want to emphasize that this is not just valuing the business if you plan to sell it, because you also are going to value the business if you're going to hand it down to a second or a third generation. Now, you might capture that value differently. It might be paid by your son or daughter over a long period of time. But we still are going to want to value the business so we can understand what it is that the underlying economic return for so many years of hard effort and sacrifice is worth. And so it's really important to start working through and understanding what it is that is happening in your industry and what are the biggest determinants of value. So for our last, go ahead.
Since most people here are in partnerships, it makes it even more important for the partners involved in a business to be clear on the value and on the plans to begin those discussions.
That's
so
absolutely
you need
right.
help, you need support, which is why you have the chamber willing to partner with us to do this webinar.
Yes, and so this support piece is really important, and it really comes in a couple of different pieces. And it's important to say that while you certainly could, there is no reason that you need to do this alone, right? That we would encourage you to really seek out first personal assistance. So as the owner or owners, connecting with a business valuation expert is really important. Many business brokers have either themselves become valuation experts or they have partnered with firms that do valuation. But you can seek that out independently. And again, to speak to what we were just talking about on the last slide, it's really important that you go out and you get expertise around this. I see, as I talk to business owners and as I've done some research on biz buy sell data, right, that people's expectation of what their company is worth and what it is actually worth in the market are sometimes wildly off because they never sought out expertise that exists there. But it's not only that, right? You need to be working with your accountant to understand the tax consequences of how you structure the sale, how you would win and how you would recognize gains on the sale of your business, working with your lawyer. This becomes a part of a holistic exit plan that you will have that will help you to understand and structure deals in the right way. In addition to that, we really want to encourage you to connect with people who can help you either guide emotional conversations if you are having them inside your firm and for yourself. Having trusted advisors so that you can make good decisions about the next stage of your business, both in terms of who it is that's going to take over, how you're going to manage that change management process that Faye was talking about earlier, as well as making sure that you have people who can help you understand what's involved in change. We see so often this recognition by a small business owner that they want to hand over the business, that they're ready either to capture the wealth or they want to take some more time off. But as a business owner, so much of your identity is tied up in this business that you have spent years, maybe decades building, that getting to the point where you're no longer the owner, you're no longer in charge, especially if you're still kind of coming in and training the new owners, that can be really hard. And having people that you trust who can help you to recognize when and where you are able to best manage your own kind of emotional components, as well as any socio-emotional stakes, whether it's in the family or among employees, is really important. And then finally, reaching out to people who provide business assistance. So this exit planning, entrepreneurial exit and succession planning has been identified as one of the most critical needs by the SBDC in Maine. And it goes right back to what Ben was talking about earlier and understanding Maine's business context, right? This is we are at the beginning, really, of a huge transition between the baby boomers and generations that follow, that hopefully will be able to take these businesses and grow them and grow employment and have follow-on impacts. And so there are a variety of business assistance sources. We like to think that the Maine Business School is a great source of business assistance. We've got a Maine Business Institute, which is designed explicitly to help businesses in the state, leveraging the expertise of the faculty here. But we also would encourage you to develop an advisory board or to lean on your board of directors to help and make sure that you are engaging in really rigorous and robust efforts to professionalize your firm and prepare it really to be handed over. And then there are a variety, we just picked a couple there. We know that there are many, many, many more organizations that do this type of assistance, either on a fee basis or for free in the case of the SBDC and SCORE. So we have one kind of final poll, and then we would love to get questions. As Faye said, I could certainly talk about this topic forever, but we wanted to get your questions. So to what extent would you be interested in additional workshops or topics on this seminar, diving into some of those kind of sub areas as you think about your own plans and your own intentions?
I love polls.
At least,
I love polls. I
at
just
least,
love to see what people think. It's good.
At least so far, nobody's not interested. You wouldn't hurt our feelings if you said you weren't interested. I think maybe.
That's pretty good, Dr. Harkins. That was nice dancing around that issue. That's.
So it looks like many of you would be, you know, at least somewhat interested, and so we really appreciate that, and we really do want to know. Do you have questions for us? It could be a specific question. It could also be a generic question, you know, more about how companies are valued or something like that. If you wanted to type that into the chat, or I think raising your hand might be an option too.
Thank you.
I'll just highlight that if you do have a question, feel free to type it into the chat. If you do have, I think on the reactions part, if you raise your hand, we'll try to unmute you and get to your questions that way. So feel free. I'll get us started right off with a question that I have from the chamber perspective anyway, and thank you for those very informative presentations. In Maine, we've seen a lot of, in the last 10 years, I think businesses use the ESOP model as a transition out of their business and passing it along to their employees. I'm wondering if you could talk about that model a little bit, and also when does it make sense to consider an ESOP, especially, and we have had small businesses use it here in Maine. We've had bigger businesses use it as well. So I wonder if you could just speak to the ESOP model.
Sure. So the ESOP is the creation of an employee stock ownership plan, right? Where you essentially sell ownership of the business into employees. There are some very meaningful and real advantages to a business that transitions to an ESOP, particularly on a tax basis, because the transition to an ESOP alters the tax structure for the business on a going forward basis, essentially eliminating its forward-looking tax liability. The ESOP model is, so there's kind of two ways to think about it in terms of when it makes sense. If handing over your business to your employees is really valuable because it aligns very directly and concretely with the values that you as the owner or owners have, it can make sense down into fairly small, although there is some bottom limit at which point an ESOP makes sense, but fairly small organizations. But I would say from an economic perspective, the ESOP transaction is not inexpensive. And it's not uncomplicated. And so typically we see ESOPs happening with larger businesses. That's not to say that these are organizations that necessarily have hundreds of employees, but there are certainly larger organizations where the kind of revenues and the employee base make sense. Creating an ESOP around an organization or company that employs 5 people is really difficult, because you end up having to distribute the ownership of the business into relatively small numbers of employee hands. It might be easier at that point to just sell the business to the employees and have them form a partnership. But it's a great question. We have seen a lot more of it happening, I think, largely on the basis of the tax advantage that exists for employee ESOP-based businesses.
We do have another question in the chat room from Matthew Damon. His question is, how does a business owner navigate having to sell quickly due to an illness, retirement, or another unforeseen event? Are there resources to fast track a sale?
There are, and that's a great question, Matthew. So there's really 2 general paths there. One would be similar to thinking about having to sell a house quickly, right? You can essentially go find a business broker in this case who can aggressively and actively shop your business with people that they know are buyers, and manage that process through a professional who has training experience and has built a network around helping people buy and sell businesses. Or you can use a platform like Biz Buy Sell to put your business out there and list it for sale on a website. Both of those can be quick, although neither of them usually is as quick as people would like. It comes down in many ways to probably getting less value out of the business than you otherwise might. It's not to say that it has to happen that way, but typically if you need to exit your business quickly and you haven't necessarily had the time to develop a successor and build those systems and do other things that would allow you to capture that long-term value, then that means you're probably going to have to sell it for less than it is really worth in order to entice somebody to move quickly into the business, which is one of the reasons that we wanted to emphasize the importance of starting now. I mean, you never know when you're going to have to exit because of those unforeseen things happening. If you are building those systems today, even if you don't plan to retire for 20 years, if you had to leave the business in 3 months, you would be better off having started today to engage in some of the building of systems and identifying of successors than if you hadn't done so.
All right, I'll remind everyone, if you do have a question, feel free to put it into the chat. I have another question here in regards to, I think most of the businesses that in our poll are less than 10 employees, and we find that a lot in Maine, that they do wear multiple hats in there. They're the head of human resources. They're the CFO of their company. They wear it all, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, I think, when they think about this. And I know, Dr. Gilbert, you talked a little bit early on about processes, and when they sit down to do that, what's the most important first step to take that so they're not too overwhelmed of they're the jack of all trades in their business and they're emotionally tied to it? So I wonder if you could speak a little bit of taking that step to looking at succession planning.
Yes, I want to make sure I was unmuted. Thank you. I don't know that it's ever easy. I think you have to start with yourself and making notes about it's an entrepreneurial exit. I love that view that from working with Dr. Harkins, even on this presentation, I love the view of the stream of things are going to continue on. It's a process, though, to have my emotions about that setting change from one of dread to one of an excitement in planning. But you're right, to avoid it being overwhelming, change is not easy during the best of times. And so to begin with step one, for me, that has tended to be easiest with asking people around me, could you tell me how you would pass on your expertise for this function? So if you begin to write notes for one function, that may then help you get to the point of being able to see the longer term vision around that bend in the stream, that it's going to continue. And so one step at a time, one one step at a time so that you're not overwhelmed with the big change. You begin to make progress with each aspect of the operational functions of the firm until you can see the bigger picture of how you would exit.
Thank you, Dr. Gilbert. We do have a question from our friend Corey King at the Mid-Coast Chamber of Commerce. And Corey, we're going to unmute you because you say it's kind of long, and we'll let you ask the question.
Yes, it's shocking to those that know me that it's going to be a long question. I was writing it out, but a couple things. One, I've been saying, so I run the Chamber of Commerce in the Bath, Brunswick area. I've been saying to members for the last 4 years, succession planning is the biggest issue that nobody's talking about. Because the generational shift is, I mean, as you've outlined, these numbers that you have are spectacular. Thank you for starting this conversation, and thanks to the Chamber for starting it. Two-part question. So I've been trying on our regional local chamber level to develop some sort of program that we can offer through the chamber to help our businesses, because this is such a wide-ranging problem that I don't think going one by one, you know, and having it all funnel up to a CEI or even the business school is going to be the way to go. That if we already have the grassroots network of the regional and local chambers that already have access to the businesses, is there a way that we can form a program, using the chambers, the local regional chambers, to offer it to their members? And the best I've come up with is trying to get like maybe some teams, maybe getting a consultant, or getting 2 or 3 consultants from my chambers, build their own team. Their teams consist of a lawyer and a financial planner that are also chamber members. And then maybe the chamber offers a 2-hour, first time consultant, meeting or something to get it launched so they can start to have this conversation. So one question is, what role can the local and regional chambers play? The second part is, and I don't know how true this is, but in my conversations, someone told me that Maine Farmland Trust has a program where if a farmer's getting too old to use their farm, they end up helping them market the farm. They find a buyer, they work the land together for 6 months, and then the farm transitions, and then it becomes, and then the community doesn't lose a farm. Is there a way to set up a program like that for a sign maker, for a mechanic, for all these other jobs that are out there? So that's my big long questions.
I love the way that you're thinking, Corey. It's exactly the way that I think. What's the entrepreneurial thing we could do here? I think there's definitely a role for the chamber. There is no doubt in some ways that getting those first pieces in place of an estate planner or a tax accountant and that kind of legal side of the individual obligation is going to be really important. I would say the role of the chambers, though, to me, is really to bring together essentially, I would think of it as kind of like a mastermind where you could bring together between 8 and 12 business owners in disparate industries so they don't feel like they're competing with one another, but where they can really start to take on this idea of building systems and understanding what it is that's going to be involved in maximizing the value of their business when they go to exit. A lot of that piece, right, is having a group that holds you accountable for doing the work. It's really easy in the crush of doing all of the things that Ben was just talking about, where I'm the CFO and the human resources officer, and I fill in when employees call out sick, et cetera, et cetera. It's really easy to get caught up in all of that little activity and not have anybody holding you accountable for starting to build your operating manual so that you could transition out of just being the CFO. Maybe you still have to be the chief human resource officer and the janitor, but maybe you can build that piece. And so those masterminds can work really well, and they can provide a lot of that emotional support that is so important, that we think about leaving our business not as leaving our identity or who we are, but indeed transitioning the business into the next generation. So I love that idea. I think that the chamber could could host or hire, or maybe itself be the facilitator of some of those masterminds for identified businesses, and then bring people in as that made sense. The Maine Farmland Trust idea is really an interesting one. I can think of lots of things that would make that very complicated. But I think I would want to be really thoughtful about how you would structure that, because of a whole variety of legal liability issues, among other things. But I do think that there's no doubt that if the chamber, if the regional chambers are inclined to really advocate for these businesses, there's no doubt it just helps, especially if the goal is to transition ownership and you're engaging in succession planning that is embedded to some degree within Maine, right? So if you put your business on Biz Buy Sell tomorrow, it might be bought by Jane down the street. It might also be bought by somebody from California, because you're putting your business up for sale on the equivalent of, a Zillow for businesses. But if you can work on identifying those local resources and local potential entrepreneurs, that can be the best of all worlds for everybody.
Thank you. I do want to highlight, we do have a comment in the chat room from Rob Brown that there is a resource website they have built down in Washington County for ownershiptransition.org. Encourage anyone to use that resource. And we do have another question from Bruce Hall. His question is, particularly after the past year, a lot of businesses are in tough shape. Shouldn't a key step be to come up with a strategy and plans to get the business healthier between now and the time of transition? How do businesses get help in this area?
I know that my brother asked me at one point in time that he didn't believe he was going to get the sale price for his sole proprietorship that he wanted, because he really had 2 sets of books. And my answer to him was very clear. Oh no, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. And you've got 2 sets of books. That's not true. You do not have 2 sets of books. You cannot get the sale price for your business if you're hiding income. You're going to have to first come and bring it all together. And that conversation occurred about 15 years before he sold the business. And I'm very glad that I convinced him to bring it into 1 set of books and to honestly report it going forward. And he did maximize the sale value of the firm. It seems like a simple step, but that starting early and getting the advice from trusted advisors that Jason was talking about before can help you set a goal for the end game of what value do I need to develop between now and then, and what steps do I need to take to get it there, so that you move out of the routine of the activities you have to do to keep the business going, and you move into this entrepreneurial planning phase of how are we going to maximize value and then have a succession afterwards. What else, Jason? What did I forget?
Well, Bruce, that's a great question. And it speaks exactly to what we were talking about throughout the presentation about the goal is to get 3 to 5 years out in front of this. And businesses can access a lot of resources for help right now. I know certainly if you're in Maine, again, put a plug in from the Maine Business School. I think we've got some great expertise here. But there are certainly a whole variety of different resources that exist, whether it's the SBDC and SCORE that we mentioned earlier. There are national programs that exist, like Kaufman's Fast Track program, which has sites all over the country. So there are a whole variety of different resources that are oriented at helping businesses that are in business today to do more and better business tomorrow, right? To orient themselves to growth and to position themselves to grow, and really showing a strong trajectory of 3 to 5 years worth of growth in your business is one key component to maximizing the value when you go to sell it, because then you can build a model of the future wealth that the person who's going to buy your business, or if you're handing it down to your successors, what they will be able to achieve with the business, which is a forward-looking and in a growth orientation versus a business that's stagnant or perhaps declining.
And it can be as simple as even paying attention to your Chamber of Commerce. So chambers are known for bringing together topics and bringing together the people that need to take a look at how do you build more, and are there best practices in sharing ideas for our community within our chamber to go forward into the future. So it can start simple, but the sharing of ideas is also important. Some people take that well, and for some people it's a little more difficult. So
thank you. We have just a few minutes left here in the webinar, and it's hard to believe it's gone by so quickly. So thank you, Dr. Gilbert, and thank you, Dr. Harkins. This is very, very informative for the Maine business community. But I do want to kick it back to Jamie at this point with a few minutes left. I know she has she wants to speak about a program that's going on at the Maine Graduate School of Business as well. So Jamie?
Thank you very much for the chance to learn from you, Dr. Harkins and Dr. Gilbert, but also to speak about this a little bit. So about a year ago, we developed and released a partnership with every single chamber in the entire state of Maine to allow significant discounts for chamber members to be able to go back to school and either take a few classes to brush up some skills that they might be lacking, or to complete their entire MBA. It's called the Workforce Partners Program, and we have lots and lots of members taking advantage of it all across the state right now. What it does is it allows your employees to receive a 12% discount on tuition. And that's a very big deal, because it means that the price of getting your MBA is actually just over $12,000 if you are a chamber member. It's a tremendous opportunity for everyone. More information on the Workforce Partners Program is available on the website. I think Melanie is posting that into the chat right now. However, more importantly, I'm here as your resource for any kind of questions about the Workforce Partners Program, about ways to skill up your employees as you start to develop some of them for perhaps a leadership position or even a transitionary role. And to help, if you would like to contact any of our faculty or Dean Gilbert or Dr. Harkins with additional questions today, I am here for you. The Workforce Partners Program is always looking for new businesses to be able to reach out to and work with and learn more about what your needs are. We also help employers to identify interns, and there are some great opportunities here within the University of Maine system to help you if you can't afford an intern. We have ways to submit small grants to kick in the last dollar so that we can still get those interns a little bit of summer pay. So please feel free to reach out to me, to reach out to any one of us. I'm very glad to have had some time with you today. Now, Dean Gilbert or Dr. Harkins, do you have any final words?
Thank you all for being here today. I enjoyed learning a lot from Dr. Harkins and being a part of this, but it's always a pleasure when you can convene people who are interested in going forward with intent. And that's what this is all about. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to just double down on that. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I think if you take anything away from this, right, it's start now, wherever you're going, whether it's 5 months or 5 years from now, start building those systems and leverage the resources that exist across the state to be able to help you wherever you identify a need, because we all want to see these businesses perpetuate. We want to see you be recognized and rewarded for your hard work and see Maine's economy grow going forward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harkins and Dr. Gilbert and Jamie. I just want to close out by saying once again, we really, truly here at the Chamber appreciate our partnership with the University of Maine Graduate School of Business. We encourage people to take advantage of the program, the Workforce Partners Program, and to bring such important information like the webinar we had today out to the Maine business community. So thank you so much. I think everyone here found it extremely valuable. I'd also like to close out by thanking our sponsors. This program wouldn't be possible without our partnership with Maine. Also with our supporting sponsors, Amera Health Caritas, Bangor Savings Bank, Central Maine Power, Eaton Peabody, Mimic, Maine Employees Mutual Insurance Company, and Rudman and Winchell. So with that being said, I think we're right on time to end the webinar here at the top of the hour. It's a beautiful spring day here in Maine, so let's all get outside and enjoy a little bit of that sunshine. Thanks a lot and have a good one, everyone.